Welcome to our session of Insider's View upon EP vendors. My name is Jonas Andersson. I'm head of HerbertNathan Co, in independent advisory consultancy in Scandinavia. With me today I have Robert Sinfield from Sage, and we'll have a talk about Sage today and Sage tomorrow. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So why not start telling the audience who's Robert?
So my name's Robert Sinfield. I have been in the ERP industry for a long time, 20 years. Worked on the sort of coalface as a consultant, been a customer. I made the transition to product management about 15 years ago and have worked for a few different ERP vendors in the time. Joined Sage about 5 years ago, and I am now responsible for our Sage X3 product globally, look after product management, product marketing, development, ISVs and partnerships, and also look after a couple of other things within Sage, which I won't bore your audience with.
I know that Sage is a very large organization and an international organization. But the strange thing is, from a Scandinavian perspective, it's a rather unknown company. So I think it would be good for you to introduce Sage for the audience that are not yet aware of Sage from a Scandinavian perspective. Who is Sage?
So it's a good question, and it's very true. Sage had been around for about 40 years, formed in Newcastle by a couple of entrepreneurs who wanted to do something different with accounting software. We've grown over the years, and we are a global company. We have companies in most of the major locations, with the exception being Scandinavia. Scandinavia, we're a little bit late to. We have turnover annually of around 1.8 billion pounds. So what's that? 15 billion Swedish crowns. We have about 3 million customers globally. And in the small to medium size space, we have about 250,000 customers globally using a variety of products, including Sage X3.
So are we actually talking about a global organization? We have in both North America, South America, Europe, Asia, or?
Yeah, so we're located obviously headquartered in the UK. We're in the UK, Ireland, France, Central Europe, in Germany and Austria. We have locations in Spain and Portugal. We have offices out in Asia, Australia, Southern Africa, and then the US and Canada. We've actually moved our business to a partnership model in South America, but we do have a large customer base, particularly in Brazil.
And if we look at the software portfolio that you're offering, I came in contact with Sage, I think it was 10 years ago, and was surprised that there was a wide range of offerings within the portfolio. I think that's still the case today. A rather wide offerings, and from a customer target group from very small up to rather large customers.
Yeah, we're fortunate in that we do have a wide customer portfolio, and we can offer our customers a wide variety of choice. So our vision is really to help small organizations, maybe 10, 15 employees, kind of grow and graduate into larger solutions up the sort of Sage ladder, as you would say. We focus both on finance and accounting solutions and ERP capabilities, but we also then have a rich portfolio in human resource management and payroll. I guess where Sage has grown significantly over time is through really targeting that sort of small, medium-sized customer and growing them and helping them graduate as they move up, kind of moving up the different parts of the portfolio. But it's as much about choice as it is about anything else. we're determined not to force customers to go from one product to another. We will provide them with options, but it's ultimately up to the customer where they want to be in the portfolio.
And historically, growth, has that been organically and now you start to acquisitions? Because that's what I've understood the last years. There have been rather many acquisitions within the Sage group.
Yeah, we continue to be very acquisitive, but Sage as a company has kind of grown through acquisitions over time. It was a variety of different companies that kind of came together to form a much bigger entity, and we've grown that way. But we've made some significant acquisitions over the last 15 years, one of those being Adonics, which is now the X3 product. We've then acquired a product called Sage Intact, which was a fairly sizable acquisition of about $1 billion at the time. We've acquired software in the HR and payroll space, Cake HR, which is now Sage HR. We acquired a couple of years ago. But our path is really about organic growth, supplemented by acquisitions where they make sense. So they don't all have to be major acquisitions. We made a larger one earlier this year, which was about $300 million in the retail space. But just last week, we announced a new acquisition, which was a really targeted acquisition focusing on funding management for religious dioceses. So really deepening our industry capability. So it's a bit of a mix. Sage itself is growing quite aggressively. Our cloud native revenues last year grew at about 44%. So in line with the industry, but we're looking to continue that growth going forward.
And the strategy currently is that you're strengthening your footprint within these segments that you have today, or you're expanding? Because the acquisition of Adonics meant a bit that you're moving upwards in the target segment, customer size. So is that a strategy, or how do we look upon X3 acquisition compared to the other portfolio that we have?
So I think X3 was the Adonics acquisition, which then became X3, was an interesting one for Sage because it helped to strengthen our proposition in France, where we are market leaders in the French market. A lot of the other acquisitions that we've made have been very targeted in terms of either strengthening our existing portfolio or broadening our footprint into adjacent areas where it makes the most sense. We're not going out and buying things which are just random acquisitions. Everything that we're doing is designed around how do we continue to expand our footprint. So some of the acquisitions that we've made, as I say, are very industry specific. They're very, very focused, very targeted. Some of them are more generic. Some of them are technology acquisitions where we found some really interesting technologies and we want to take advantage of those. But the acquisitions that we're making at the moment are very targeted in terms of supporting that strategy and helping us to maintain our strength, or actually help us move into a slightly new area for us, which is what the case was with Bright Pearl.
Isn't there a risk when you're having a lot of acquisitions that you're ending up with a wide portfolio, but still they're very separate solutions without any synergies? If I compare with Visma, which is a very well-known organization in Scandinavia at least, I think they have acquired a lot of systems the last 5 years, but often also they are ending up being a standalone systems without any synergies. I think that will change, of course, in the future, but what is your view upon the acquisitions? Are you planning to bring it together on the same platform, or what's the concept that you have looking forward?
So that's a really good question. So Sage has spoken for a few years about what we call our Sage Business Cloud platform, and we've recently been talking to the market about what we're doing with our digital network. Now, some products that we acquire, they fit perfectly into the portfolio. They're aligned from a technology perspective, and it's literally plug and play. Some of them are designed to be more horizontal solutions, so they'll support multiple products. Look at what we did with Auto Entry, which was AP automation. It's perfect. Doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are, you have supplier invoices that need to be processed and paid. So there are quite often very, very good synergies in terms of the acquisitions that we've made. When we look at some of the more larger acquisitions that we've made, obviously Intact being the biggest one that we made, that's a standalone product, but it fits really well into our portfolio and filled a gap that we had in our portfolio. What we are doing though is sharing capabilities, best practices, technologies between the acquisitions that Sage has made, and this is helping us to create a digital network which is going to really allow our customers to knock down those barriers and thrive, because they're taking advantage of technology which is pervasive, but they don't need to be an expert in AI or machine learning. And the good thing about this is that we're able to leverage these pockets of expertise, and they can really focus on what their expertise is. So where we've got our Sage AI labs, they're able to focus on the AI capabilities that we need and kind of just experiment and develop. And they're doing over 500 different data experiments a week. So It's really interesting seeing that kind of come to fruition with some of the new capabilities that we brought out on our products.
Interesting, thanks. So what about the Scandinavian market? You haven't been so many years at Sage yet, so perhaps you're not familiar with the history, but from my perspective, Sage was a rather late on the Scandinavian market. And at the same time, Scandinavia has a very high IT maturity and been in the forefront when it comes to ERP systems and competition. But we haven't seen Sage until, I can't know if it's 7 or 8 years perhaps. So a rather late start in Scandinavia. Do you know why?
I think Sage has had so much opportunity in the markets that it's been operating in. And they've kind of been in a position where they've been able to really double down in the markets that they've been in. When you're the dominant player in a market, you tend to focus in on that market. Like you say, Scandinavia is a really interesting market from an IT maturity perspective. There are lots of ERP solutions that have kind of grown up in Scandinavia that have then been acquired by other players, much larger US or UK or international players. Scandinavian market is really interesting for us. It's somewhere that we're getting into. We're seeing a lot more activity in it. I think the Scandinavian market is also changing a little bit from an industrial mix perspective. There's a little bit of a different focus in the way that industry is being handled in Sweden. There's a bit of a deviation from some of the traditional industries that we've seen. That gives us an opportunity. We have a huge strength in X3 in, say, food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, chemicals. It's a logical market for us to come to if you look at some of the companies that operate in this space. And we're starting to see some traction. It's really interesting. But yeah, I can't explain why we were late into the market, but I can tell you that we're looking at this market very closely, and it's somewhere that we want to expand, but do it in the right way. Not go out and try and get like 1,000 customers instantaneously. There's also, the other thing is it's a congested market. Yeah. There aren't that many businesses in Sweden relative, or in Scandinavia relative to the rest of the world. I mean, if you look at the US, there are 270,000 manufacturing businesses in the US. That's a fairly sizable market opportunity. I was talking to someone yesterday who said to me they'd been to London and they'd driven around the M25 ring road and they'd driven past more manufacturers than there probably was in Scandinavia, which is...
Yeah, that's true.
It's quite interesting when you think about that, but the customers that you find here are generally much more sophisticated. So they're looking for a sophisticated product, which is really ripe for us, which is why we think we'll be very, very successful in Scandinavia going forward.
You said when you presented yourself that you have a history from the ERP sector. You've been working with several vendors.
Correct.
After 5 years, what's your view upon Sage? What is unique with Sage, or is there anything unique with Sage as a organization? What's the DNA of Sage?
So that's a fantastic question, and it's probably one of the best questions that I can actually answer. So I've had the privilege of working with American vendors. I have worked as a customer with some big German companies. And I've also worked with some smaller Swedish ERP vendors as a consultant and just in the market. What really drew me to Sage was it's the way that they focus on their customers. It's genuinely about how do we help our customers to kind of thrive? How do we help them to knock down the complexities? One of the things that I love about Sage is we have these values which are the core principles to everything that we do. And our sort of primary core principle is we do the right thing. And we do the right thing for customers and what have you, but we're also a company that are brave and bold. We're making brave and bold decisions. Sage does some fantastic charitable work. Our Sage Foundation has raised, just in the few years that I've been there, we've raised like £4 million worth of things. We give to businesses. We have a number of business startup programs and things like that. We've just announced our winners of the Boss Network, which is to sponsor women in business or underprivileged business owners. So there's a heart to the company, which is really unique. The company has changed significantly as well since I joined, by the way. It's become a really interesting place. We've got some fantastic leaders who are innovating a lot. When I joined Sage, I thought, they're not innovating that much. I've seen the innovation and it's becoming pervasive. And that to me is going to help our customers significantly. That's going to it's actually going to help businesses in general. It's not just about selling the Sage brand. It's about how can we simplify the complex, not make it easy. ERP is never going to be easy. Anybody who thinks that ERP stands for easy is crazy. But it's about how do we remove some of that complexity. And it's not just technology for technology's sake. I think sometimes as an industry, we're guilty of check out this new framework and customers go, okay, how do we use it? So that's one of the things that we're trying to do a little bit differently at Sage.
So I will now give you the opportunity, difficult question, but to give me some of the unique functionality with Sage X3. I have been looking at the system. I know you have a product configurator, which is very flexible. You have the open database, traceability, medical traceability, etc. But what else would you like to point out as something that is, from your opinion, a little bit unique or strengths with X3?
You're right, it's a difficult question. So I'm going to answer it in a kind of a roundabout way, but hopefully we'll get there. I think a lot of the systems that are in the market today are all very capable solutions, and they all do a lot of the same things. There's only so many ways you can do debits and credits. So I think that's always a challenge. It comes down to a degree to what the company's looking for in terms of where we'll win. We obviously have a huge amount of strength in food and beverage and chemicals and pharma and nutraceuticals because of things like our traceability, our ability to do to track shelf life management. So those are really important capabilities. I think one of the things that has drawn me to X3, and one of the things that I really like about the product, is I'm always discovering something new. We have a really, really capable CRM solution. I know a lot of people go out and they look for best of breed CRMs, and they'll go and pay a fortune for a standalone solution. A lot of companies don't use that. So simple things like that are a real winner for me, because it's good enough for what most companies need, because they don't need everything that you get in these fantastic CRM solutions that are out there. A couple of the other things that I think that we're doing with the product, which are really interesting, is the ability to approach product design, product lifecycle management in a different way. So we've not built a PLM solution or a PDM solution into the software. But again, we've built the ability for companies to manage the life cycle of their products from start to finish, from cradle to grave, and sort of track profitability on the products. How much have I spent? Manage the design process through a project in the actual application. That's quite important. The ability to do what if scenarios from a costing perspective. So take an existing bill of material, we call it new product design, but it does so much more than that. Take a new bill of material or an existing bill of material and kind of switch out components, create components on the fly. A lot of vendors can do that, but they don't necessarily manage it through a process. That's quite an interesting thing that we spent quite a lot of time on. Non-conformance is another area where I think we have some really strong capabilities. If you want to manage material returns, why has there been a non-conformance? How do you manage that non-conformance? Again, that ties into the CRM capability. So if you don't want to do that, one of the other areas that we've always had, but we've just done a major modernization work around it, is the ability to do warehouse automation, handheld data collection in the warehouses. Pretty much everything that you can do in the core system, you can do on a handheld. Having that capability baked into it, as well as shop floor control, means that people don't have to go and buy extra bits of kit and plug them into the application. Where we're going with the product is going to certainly be a strength for us. We've started to wrap the product in a new API framework. That may not sound very new and innovative, but the way that we're doing it is new and innovative, because a lot of companies use a REST API. We're using a web API. The beauty of a web API is that it's relatively low overhead. I'm sure you know the difference between REST and web APIs, but for the audience out there, for those of you who are not necessarily technical, and I'm not particularly technical, so I'll give you the explanation that was given to me. Imagine you go to your favorite restaurant and you're not that hungry and you really have your eyes set on one particular item on the menu. And if you like a bit of wine, maybe one specific glass of wine. And a web API is a little bit like that. You go and you order a la carte and you get exactly what you want. A REST API is a little bit like a fixed menu. You've got like 10 courses and you've got to eat every single course to be able to move to the next course. And with that comes a huge overhead. There's cost, there's a little bit less flexibility. And the reason why we've gone down this route is because of the flexibility. You called it out yourself. Flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. And another thing that we've just launched, and I'll stop after this one because this is genuinely one of my absolute favorite capabilities, is everybody's interested in the cloud. Everybody wants the cloud. And to be honest, most people don't care whether it's multi-tenanted, single-tenanted, whether it's a flavor of a combination of the two, whether it's in AWS or whether it's in Azure or whether it's in Google Cloud. They don't really care about it. They just want the cloud. It's the cloud. It has to be in the cloud. And they don't care about the mechanics behind that. So what we've done is we've tried to democratize the cloud a little bit. And we've taken the tooling that we use for our own cloud, all of the management consoles, all of the deployment mechanisms, and we've actually done something quite different, and we've made that available to the market. We've said, you know what? You don't want to sit in our cloud and follow our update cadence and our release cadence, and you want to tailor the application to your heart's desire, but you want to be in the cloud and know that it's best-in-class architecture, it's secure, you can monitor it and manage it. You can have us monitor it and manage it for you, or your partner monitor it and manage it for you. Here's the tooling for that. Here's everything that you need to be able to do that. Oh, and by the way, every time we release a new version of the software, we'll give you the best-in-class architecture and any updates that we make to that. So we're trying to democratize the cloud. It's a huge step away from what our industry's been doing, where it's all give it to us, give it to us, give it to us. We're now going, you know what? You want the cloud? Here's the cloud your way. I'll quote a famous brand of hamburgers, Burger King. Have it your way. You don't want tomato, you don't want lettuce, don't have tomato, don't have lettuce. I know my kids never have tomato and lettuce on their burgers. But that's exactly what we're doing with our customers.
My understanding is the cloud offering they have is, at least when I was talking to Systemstöd the other day, your partner in Scandinavia, they mainly offer it as a private cloud, but you also have a public cloud offering, but that's related to each market, isn't it?
So we do have a public cloud offering, which is offered in a variety of different markets. It's a little bit like a lot of other public clouds that are out there. It's quite constrained. You don't necessarily have the freedom to go away and do what you want. We don't, for example, allow code changes or source code changes or anything like that. And it's a little bit like saying, what's the goodness of X3? Well, the goodness of X3 is the flavors, the way that you can have it. And this is one of the reasons why we've tried to democratize the cloud in a different way. We want to give it to our customers in the way that they want. So yeah, we'll continue to run our cloud offering. We'll continue to offer single tenant cloud offerings as well, because some people just want to be with the vendor. But I think we're also going to go down a route of, have it your way, kind of just really go your way. The great thing about it is that if someone wants us to back end the management of that cloud, we can do it. Otherwise, they can do it. It's really a choice of giving customers the choice. That's really it's that flexibility comment that you made. So yeah, we do have these cloud offerings. They're not available in every market purely because we've looked at the market conditions, we've looked at the type of customers that we have, and we don't necessarily see that a lot of the companies that we work with will want to be kind of constrained and fit in a box. And the other thing is, let's be honest, a lot of our customers operate in controlled industries. So if you're in a public cloud, you generally have to go when the vendor says, now you're going to go to the next version, you're going to take on the next release. And how many companies can actually be doing that every quarter or every 6 months? It's quite a difficult ask when you think about how much testing is required, documentation, etc., etc. So why force customers to go down that route when it may not necessarily work for them? So this is where we're taking I know it's controversial and it's a little bit of a deviation, and even some of my own Sage colleagues look at me and say, are you really sure that's the way you want to do it? But we've spoken to our customers, we've spoken to a lot of prospects in the marketplace, and this is something that is winning hearts and minds, is the fact that we are trying to give it to customers their way. We're almost in this. So think about a pair of Nike trainers. I'll give you the pair of good. I love my Nike trainers, but not everybody wants to wear the same pair of Nike trainers. Yes, some people want the Air Jordans and they just want the same Air Jordans that everybody else wants. But one of the hottest sellers on the Nike websites at the moment is these customize your own trainers, where you can change the color, the look, the feel. So if we're doing that in our consumer lives, why would we expect anything different from our businesses? We're giving people choice. That's really what it comes down to.
Thank you, Robert. I think we're running out of time. We've had a good talk, good interview. Just a final question, looking ahead. If you would like to pinpoint some of the trends that you see on the market currently when it comes to ERP and the changes, we're talking about emerging technologies and all of that, but if you're looking ahead a couple of years, would you like to pinpoint some of the trends and what kind of impact that would have on Sage and Sage X3 and how you're following the trends? Anything you would like to?
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly different view of this to what some of the rest of the industry would do. I think AI and machine learning and robotic process automation are coming whether we want them to or not. So that's a trend you have to get on board with, and you're just going to have to do stuff. And we are doing a lot of stuff in that space. I think what's going to be more impactful on businesses, and we've already started to see this with COVID, by the way, is this idea that the world of business is changing. The way that we interact is changing. If you think about pre-COVID, it was all about Six Sigma and lean and optimization and efficiency down to the smallest decimal point. COVID taught us you can't be as lean as you want to be. You need to have optionality in terms of supply chain and where you're going to source products. So I think that's an interesting trend. But I think for me, the biggest thing that's going to impact business is the circular economy. Here in Sweden, you've got Agenda 2030, which is this drive towards the circular economy. And there's 4 different initiatives from the government about how the circular economy needs to be implemented. We've recently done some surveys of nearly 1,000 businesses across a variety of different countries and asked them, so what does the circular economy mean for you? And what was interesting is 1/3 of them have said it's impacting their business right now. 2/3 of them have said it's going to impact them right now or within the next 3 years. So that's got to be one of the biggest mega trends that businesses need to look at, because they need to be thinking about how do they change their manufacturing processes, their sourcing processes. How do we source differently? Because you can't just go and say, well, they're the cheapest price. You've now got to look at quality, reusability, modularity, their green status. Are they Swan marked, for example, the mark by the Swan here in Sweden? And that, together with how you impact that on your system through this idea of digital transformation, is going to be really interesting, because again, digital transformation, everybody thinks it's these massive projects. Oh, I've got to go and change my ERP solution. I think a lot of people are going to be looking at how can I get more out of what I have? But obviously, if you're changing your ERP system, I recommend Sage X3. It's a really good choice. But on a serious note, I think from a megatrends perspective, the circular economy, we've not really heard a lot of people talking about it. I've been screaming about it for about 4 years, 5 years, telling people it's coming and we need to be ready for it. Legislation is coming into effect in the next 6 to 12 months around the new plastics tax in the UK. You've got legislation coming in here in Sweden pretty shortly around some of the packaging information and things like that you need to submit. So that for me is going to have a massive impact, along with obviously AI and machine learning and the cloud and data and all of those sorts of things, because data is going to be the foundation for how we track what's happening with the circular economy.
Would it be fair to say that the changes that we've seen the last 20, 30 years are rather limited compared to the challenges that we will see in the coming 5 years, because we're so rapidly changing the way that we're working and the economics? And is that a fair way of looking at it?
I think for me personally, as I think of myself as a little bit of a future gazer, I try and think about what business is going to be like over the next 5 years. You're right, the change that we've seen in the last 30 years has been exponential versus anything that we'd ever seen before. And you look at how data is growing, and data is now so cheap. Hard drive space is so cheap. I think the rate of change that we're going to see in business is going to be absolutely exponential. Legislative changes are going to really, really make it complex for businesses. We're going to have to look at education in a different way. A lot more people are going to be looking at robotics. Robotics don't mean people go out of jobs. It means they do different things. Yeah. So we're going to have to reskill our workforce. The other thing is that we're going to have to think about is people are going to be retiring significantly later. What does that mean for manufacturing? What does that mean for distribution? So I think we're on the cusp of something fantastic, but equally scary at the same time.
Yeah.
I honestly do believe that we're going to go into a golden era for manufacturing. I'm a firm believer in that, because I think we're starting to see all of these shortages in every area, and everybody's looking at how can we fix those shortages. So we're going to have to do things differently, which is going to mean that we're going to be seeing a new sort of the 5th industrial revolution almost. Additive manufacturing, 3D printing are going to become massively pervasive. I think new types of materials. There's been some great work done here in Sweden around graphene and graphite, and the work that's being done at Chalmers. Foldable, bendable TVs or screens. So you go to a show like we were at yesterday, and you just pull it out and you roll it out and put it on the wall. Those are the sorts of things that we're going to see impacted. But It's going to be driven by just this immense drive towards new types of technology. So I think, yeah, the circular economy is certainly changing that. We have to think about things differently. So it's the cusp of something pretty special.
So we have an interesting future and a lot to look forward to.
Definitely.
Yes, as we said, we have an interesting future, a lot to look forward to. Sometimes I'm jealous of those that are only 20, 25 because they have a interesting 10, 15 years ahead. But I'd like to thank you for having you here.
Thank you.
And hope I can have you back sometime.
Definitely. Tack så jättemycket.
And to those of you who have been listening, thank you for listening. And follow us on our website. We will have more interviews coming along the year. So thank you for listening.